Posted by you/KazumeHerm55. I slept with my daughter's ex-boyfriend, he got me pregnant and I had an abortion. They got back together and got married. This was back in, let me think, maybe 1997. I was 38 and my daughter was 18, and she was dating Harry, who was 24. I was an alcoholic and dabbled in other drugs, mostly cocaine. I was not a good person, let alone mother. Not like I was abusive to my daughter or anything, but I was generally inattentive and cared more about my alcohol and drugs than her, especially in her teen years. I am 14 years sober now. I disapproved of my daughter dating Harry, but I never told her why. He would flirt with me, constantly, and the age difference also creeped me out. Also, he was an alcoholic and drug user, just like me. She broke up with him over his alcoholism. Soon after she moved away, not too far, but regardless she didn't live with me anymore. Harry kept calling me and asking if we wanted to get drinks. I turned him down, but then one day he said he had a bunch of coke and I couldn't resist. He came over, we did the coke, and we ended up having sex. He was a very good-looking guy. He looked a lot like that ridiculous 80s Justin Bieber picture that was on the front page today. That is actually what made me think about him. For the next few months, maybe like 3 to 4 months, he would sometimes come over and we would have sex and do drugs and get drunk together. Any drug addict knows what that is like to have a drug addict buddy in that way. Then I got pregnant. I knew it was by him. I had sex without a condom a few times stupidly. I never told him I was pregnant, and I went and got the abortion and kept it a secret. Anyways, I stopped seeing him after that. It was too weird. I also got sober, for like 4 months, before relapsing. Fast forward 2 years and my daughter contacts me and tells me that she got back with Harry, and that he is fully sober. I was mortified, honestly. He was gonna tell her that we slept together, and she is going to hate me for life. They came over one day and said hi, and when my daughter was gone, Harry told me that there is no reason to tell her about what happened. I agreed. It's been 16 years of marriage on their part. They have a kid together. Harry got cancer, then beat it. I got sober. That's basically it. I don't see them very often. They live in Texas and I live on the East Coast. But whenever I do, there is always that tension between me and Harry. It's literally the first thing that comes to either of our minds, I can just tell. Not like sexual tension, like why did we have to do that? What the fuck is wrong with us? Kind of tension. I think about this often. Especially when I see my grandson. I always think that could have been my son if things had gone differently, but wow, what a disaster that would have been if I decided to keep that child. Posted by you/ProAlim. My dad was murdered in front of me and I never told anyone. Grew up in a shitty neighborhood. My dad was a minor drug dealer, my mom worked at a grocery store, we had basically no money. My mom died from cancer when I was 10, very suddenly, so it was just me and my dad. He got more involved with selling drugs over time. When I was 13, he had 2 men over, both of whom I sort of knew as his associates, and they sort of hustled him down very suddenly and yelled at me to go to my room. I went, but I could still see them through the crack in the door. They hit him again and he tackled one to the ground and the other guy took a knife and started stabbing him in the back. Watching the knife go into him over and over again was the worst thing I ever saw. It was like 6 stabs in maybe 4 seconds, it was fast and rapid, I could barely even process what happened. The men left and ran out as soon as my dad dropped to the ground. I went over to him and he was gurgling blood and looking at me with a huge amount of fear in his eyes and crying in pain. I called 911 right away, but he died before the ambulance could arrive. I told the police it was a robbery, a home invasion. I lied because I was terrified they would come back to get me if I told the police who it was. Apparently after my dad was killed, Someone snitched on his friends who killed him. They ended up in prison for an unrelated murder. My cousin worked with my dad, he was the one who told me. I went to go live with my aunt in California, across the country. I told her it was a home invasion. I told my friends my dad was dead, no more explanation. But nobody here knows what actually happened. This was 1999. I have never told anyone about witnessing my dad's death or the intense trauma it caused me for years. I went to 2 trauma specialists and therapy for a bit, but it didn't help very much. I still think of that incident every single day of my life. It makes me quiver when I think of the image of my dad getting stabbed. Posted by you/nevershould've. I wish we had never adopted this kid. My wife and I had been trying for a couple of years to have our own kids, but found out we could not. So, we went the way we had talked about many times before, and went through adoption. Because, hey, every kid needs a home, right? That's when we came across our now adopted son, Nate. Names changed, of course. Nate was the bastard son of a whore of a mom who fucked who she could for drugs, money, etc. His bio father had some sense and convinced mom to put all 3 of her kids. Nate was the only one of his, the other 2, a brother and sister, were from unknown/different fathers. She agreed. And that was when Nate was about 6. He was technically removed due to deplorable living conditions and abuse, but she didn't fight to keep him. We met him for the first time last year. I was sketchy on him. He appeared to have ADHD. Not a deal breaker, but wouldn't have been my first choice. He never looked at us, jumped up and ran around the restaurant we met at, and had a hard time focusing. Hell, he's a 9-year-old kid. Kids have a hard time sitting still, and get nervous. I figured. My wife fell in love with him. I was still sketchy, but we had met other kids, so he wasn't our first choice at the time. We started getting more info on him, planned on meeting him more, etc. It was a learning curve. We took him to Chuck E. Cheese, just to hang with him for a day. He was all over the place. Kids. No biggie. We started finding out more from the foster parents, who we didn't care for. They seemed to be brainwashing their kids, and seemed to be in it for the money. Nothing major, but I was still being cautious. We figured maybe he had either ADHD or some high-functioning autism. Again, not a deal breaker, but it was something I'm not used to. My wife had experience, volunteer and career, with special needs children. He seemed to be growing on us. Called us mom and dad once. We started having fun together. It seemed to be a good fit. We noticed, closer to the day we took him home for 6 months before finalizing the adoption, he had addictions. Mostly video games. Not too unusual, again, he's a kid. Kids are supposed to love video games. Fuck, we both like them. Why not? But he became aggressive. Like, wouldn't listen to you, and if you turn them off or threatened to take them away, he'd become violent to throwing the controller, kicking a chair, etc. We nipped that in the ass as soon as possible, limiting him and explaining why. We eventually took it away altogether, maybe explained later. He saw a therapist/psychologist/optometrist/general physician/ and several other professionals. One diagnosed him with ADHD. Another thought autism. Another thought reactive attachment disorder. All seemed less than great. But we're attached. We'd get through this. That was about a year ago now. Ever since then, at least every other day, if not every day, we have had to put him in restraints, all okay per DHS, his therapist, and others. We've had to get onto him. We've tried different reward systems. We've tried starting nice/second chances. We've tried everything we can think of. Fuck, even trying to show unconditional love, when we feel nearly defeated. He's constantly lying about everything and anything, he plays dumb, he threatens to be bad, which we aren't afraid of. We've shown him many times we're not afraid of him. He breaks things, he has no emotions, anything. Never shows remorse, unless he's told to. Tell them you're sorry. Does what he wants, even when he knows it's going to get things taken away. He's tried, and somewhat succeeded, to hurt his dog, several times, because he wants to see how it feels pain. He's been pure hell. He understands, but doesn't care, from what we can tell. Just tonight, we had a date night, and dropped him off to a parents' night out group at the local Y. We had a great time, just being able to be ourselves. We get back, I go in to pick him up. The assistants there pull me aside and tell me he was caught trying to, well, not so much trying, he did, grab several girls' privates. Twice. That was all the info I needed. I grabbed him, a bit embarrassed, brought him to the car and had him explain to my wife what happened. Of course, we've been talking to him for several hours now, explaining why that was bad, etc. But, again, he shows no remorse and just makes up excuse after excuse. Long story short, he wanted to, and so he did. After everything we've been through, I honestly regret adopting him. I don't know if I'd adopt again if given the chance. Even if given the chance to go back in time and change my mind on him and switch to another kid, I don't think I would. We'd be much happier without him, or any other child in our home. I wish Nate had never come into our lives. And I'm pretty much sure my wife wishes the same thing. TLDR, this motherfucker we adopted has got to be fucking crazy. No other explanation.